when we charged across the border.
Yeah.
We
That was,
took
what year was that?
I don't know, man, some early 2000,
Yeah, 2006.
maybe, I don't know. It'd be nice to know.
I think it was
Kind of
six.
like to know about that. But, I had worked in the Tijuana clinics for a good part of 10 years.
Yeah.
And, for many weeks of those years, I would drive from San Juan to the border, go across the border, work. And, so that drive back then was like an hour and a half.
Mhm.
And then the border was usually an hour and a half. And then coming home. And I would be so thrilled when I was driving home,
Mhm.
having gotten a chance to work with these doctors and with these patients, because it was really something that I'd always been interested in from when I was in college. I used to go to cancer seminars, and I was studying psychology and philosophy, but I was interested in Laetrile, and all of these. I'd become a vegetarian, so I was interested in all these health practices. I was reading Pablo Arola, who was my big mentor, back then, and also Paul Bragg, and then that Jack LaLanne, you know. So when I had the opportunity to start working down there, and I actually went to Tijuana to work with an orthopedic surgeon who wanted me to work as a chiropractor.
Mhm.
And I did that for about 6 months, and then I went, man, this is crazy working in this closet with people that I can't really even speak English with. And, and then this guy comes up and says, hey, you want to work with the cancer? And it turns out that orthopedic surgeon was getting therapeutics from Germany. And it turned out that it was Professor Werner Scheidel, who is a renowned physician, considered the father of biological medicine in Europe. So there was a fellow who would go over and get therapeutics from Germany and Switzerland and France and bring them back to the Tijuana and Mexico City clinics. So it's pretty neat learning about all these therapeutics that before the internet, it wasn't easy to
To learn about all this.
track down information. You had to get a book, and you were lucky as all get out if you got a book, and so it was tough.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, all this stuff that I'd been searching for, was in my lap. And lo and behold, I then meet Burton Goldberg, who had the magazine Alternative Medicine.
Where did you
And
meet him? He was in Mexico with the clinics.
well, he came down to interview Werner Scheidel for
For
an
his book.
article in
Okay.
his magazine.
Nice.
So I met Burton, and I met his editor, and I met Werner Scheidel, and this was with Dr. Munoz. And I mean, good grief. I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was 25, 30 years ago. So I started working in those clinics, and I, as I said, I'd come home after working all day long and driving, and I was just happy as I could be, just being so grateful for this incredible opportunity. Wasn't making any money, but that didn't matter because I was learning, so much. Well, after 5, 6 years, I realized that they weren't producing the results that they were promising. They'd tell these patients, oh yeah, we got this handled. An individual patient that goes and has an experience lacks the experience of watching what that doctor does for years with dozens and hundreds of people.
Yeah.
It wasn't all that good.
Okay.
And when I realized that, like they weren't changing the therapies around for, a breast cancer patient, they do this, for a prostate cancer, they do that. And it wasn't all that individualized. And so I knew a really, really smart chiropractor who studied with the same doctor that taught me how to read blood chemistries back in '85. And she turned me on to this lab in Point Loma that was a bioidentical hormone lab. And the head of it, Dr. Bill Timmons, was quite brilliant. So he and I talked for about 3 days, and he decided that he'd hire me. And then I get a call from Myron Wentz, who started Sonoviv, and he wanted to hire me. So I went down with you and Mom and Stuart Charlie and Zila, saw Dr. Wentz, and good grief, a palace, you know, a
Yeah.
brand new $25 million clinic on K37.5, you know, I mean, just like, wow. And it gave me this offer of hiring doctors and developing multidisciplinary protocols for cancer, where we would integrate Western and alternative, spiritual, structural, the whole, psychological therapeutics, and we would have it all documented with computers. We were approved by Mexico City, by Tijuana, by the county of Baja. It was like, wow. But it turns out that they weren't really as inspired as I was to get the very best. And I had already compromised myself for 10 years working in the other clinics.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't compromise. And I went back and I worked at the hormone lab.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a couple of years, and that helped me understand why people with cancer were saying they were never sick. Because
Mm-hmm.
the overwhelming majority of people with cancer, 9 out of 10, will tell you they can't believe they have cancer because they were never sick their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what? So when I worked at the hormone lab, I got to do tests for in addition to doing hormone tests, we did allergy tests and stool tests and, amino acid panels and fatty acid panels, all sorts of labs. And as a lab consultant, I could call up those labs and say, hey, give me the goods on how to interpret this lab. So I interpreted thousands and thousands of tests, and I started to see a pattern. And the pattern was that people progressively got sick and got used to being sick. And
So
oftentimes it
what
started in childhood.
what do you mean exactly? They were sick and they continually just got sicker.
Well, like you, when you were a kid, you had lots of stomach aches.
Yeah.
And you had, some earaches and some sinusitis,
Major.
And I used to give you herbs and do treatments and, help you. It was always cool that I at least knew what to do. But
The green drink, the chlorophyll, it worked for a time being. I mean, but that was literally months of doing that every single morning, like drinking this tall glass of warm green,
mud.
just disgusting every single morning for months, right? I mean, it wasn't like, and that did make a difference, but obviously it wasn't the solution. The solution would be to cut out all the things that I was reactive to and all the
And I didn't
processed
know.
chemicals.
I didn't know about that. I mean, allergies were always really, really difficult. When I was a chiropractor, people with major allergies, I would send them up to an allergist. I didn't know how to handle it. And I learned about vitamin C, of course, and that
Yeah.
helped a lot.
It's cool the
But
progression that you've made by learning more and just stacking information and then realizing and being humble enough to realize that what you were doing before wasn't as good as what you could do. I think that's really important and crucial for figuring out complex subjects.
yeah, I want to make things better. But so after I worked at the hormone lab, then I worked with Dr. Vojani in immunology and autism. Then I met the Canes with neurodegenerative diseases, the ALS and multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's, autism, and Alzheimer's. Studied with them for 10 years. And after I got that under my belt and learned all that stuff, then I wanted to go back to Tijuana, and I wanted to work with Dr. Munoz, who I thought was the best of the doctors that I had worked with in those 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And that by combining what I did, which was to improve health,
Uh-huh.
with what he did to, to try to minimize growth of tumors,
Uh-huh.
I thought we'd have a real winning combination. And so, as you know, it wasn't easy to get into Mexico with our U-Haul.
Yeah.
That was crazy. And but we made it, and I got you guys out of the restaurant where you got locked up.
We passed out hard after 3 days of trying to move.
And we paid off the cops $150.
One time, and then another time someone tried to get us, and we said, no, we already paid, sorry, see ya.
And those guys were in riot gear.
And they knew. They're like, oh, okay, they know what the deal is. I'm like, nope, sorry, dude, we already paid. Get out of here.
Gosh, those stories.
Yeah. No.
And so what we did was apply what I had learned
Yeah.
in food sensitivity, in fatty acids, in hormones, in stool testing, and in blood chemistry interpretation. And it worked.
Yeah.
And you recall the type of patients. Remember, we got a dozen patients. Do you remember? I mean, each one of them had a story, but it was pretty sad, right?
Yeah. I mean, most of them are very productive, very, like all of them were high functioning humans that tried their best to make a lot of money, to live a good life. But yeah, there was, I think some of our first patients was like this guy who started a pool building company, and he had testicular cancer, and he recalls that he would put his cell phone in his crotch when he's driving for years, as well as his office was in the room that they stored all the chemicals in, because that was like, just made sense. Yeah, everyone had a story for sure.
They were desperate and scared.
It's kind of their last resort.
Yeah, they tried lots of things. Chemo, radiation, surgery hadn't worked. Alternatives hadn't worked.
Some had traveled the world and been to Europe. Yeah, I don't know. Somehow they found Munoz and us
through Burton.
Through Burton.
Yeah, Burton recommended, and so and we saw by changing their diet radically and feeding them radically, 3 meals a day, 3 snacks a day, by giving them the proper nutrients that were intended to help correct functioning of their primary systems, their digestion, their detoxification, and their immune system, their hormonal immune system. And providing them the right nutrients, the right food, lots of love, support. Holy smokes. These people that were dying when they came to our doorstep in a month were radiating.
Yeah, it was like a flower that could bloom again. They were like, their skin, their expression, I mean, they showed up dead, literally just like exhausted, dead. And when they left, they probably felt better than they had in their entire lives. And they,
well, and how about you?
Yeah, same with me. I mean, I showed up 20 years old, had the best summer of my life, super, super fit, surfing all summer. Showed up.
Your brain turned on.
And for the first time, also, I wasn't stressed out for the first time. I didn't have anxiety, which I think is related to your stomach being messed up. but also just being in like a very like loving environment where you're supported. And I realize that's a crucial aspect of it too, is like you're supporting yourself physically, but you're also supporting yourself emotionally. And I think that created what we created in the cancer clinic in Tijuana was like this sanctuary of just like doing the right thing, having the right conversations, and not being distracted with the outside world of the chaos that everyone else, you know, like what everyone else is doing, what movies to watch, what do you want butter on your popcorn, like eating gobs amount of sugar and just living like a chicken with your head cut off. Like we had this very just happy existence down there, and I think that that played a big role. Um,
Well, you and I would have 2-hour conversations after dinner
yeah,
before anybody even showed up.
practice runs.
Yeah, and we started cooking and started feeding you right,
Yeah,
and then we would have these mind-blowing conversations that were, and you would tell me, "Wow, Dad, I can think,"
yeah,
and I go, "What do you mean?" I
yeah,
didn't quite appreciate what the significance of of that.
yeah. That was really really fun to be able to have that experience at such a young age, and to kind of like break my own um, self care awareness in such a profound way. Um, yeah, and then when I left, it was really difficult. It was I realized like, oh man, like I've just been trained in like the foundation of how to exist, and then I left and like no support, no one else knew anything that I was talking about, and I tried really hard to like, hey, like this is like some cool stuff that you can do to like improve your life, and it wasn't on the radar then, you know, like gluten free was like still a joke. People were like, how can you be allergic to gluten? And like no one even, just the health consciousness wasn't even a thing really. It
Well,
wasn't
didn't you go
mainstream.
on the road? Weren't you like traveling?
Yeah, we left. I think I went from eating 3 gourmet meals fit for like a king to eating one hodgepodge meal and like snacking all day and just driving up the coast of California, almost living like a homeless person. Um, and I got majorly depressed. Like I was like, I'm not happy. And I didn't really equate it to like the the fact that I went from taking immaculate care of myself to like taking really piss poor care of myself. Um, but I realize
Plus, you were
now,
plus you were helping people, and they loved you, Stuart.
yeah,
I mean, everybody that came wanted to take you home with them.
yeah,
Just like when you were a kid, all your friends' parents would
yeah,
say, "We want to adopt Stuart." I said, "Well, sorry,
yeah,
he's mine.
yeah.
You can't do that."
It
But
was a
I mean, Burton Goldberg loved you,
yeah, yeah.
and so you were helping people, and that feeds you too.
Totally. It was like the most satisfied I've ever been, um, for sure. To be, yeah, in that environment, helping people, growing myself, taking really good care, just being in an environment of intellectual stimulation, emotional stimulation, like just focused on real stuff.
It was life or death. These people had stage 4 cancers. They were dying. They were
Yeah,
seriously sick. They were
yeah.
scared to death. They were scared.
I
And we
was so,
assured,
I was like a long hair, like just just like super chill, and I think it allowed them to also be like, hey, like we're everything's gonna be okay.
I
It
think
was
you were
great.
like a dog. You were like a dog.
Kind
You
of,
know,
for sure, just
E-
happy.
everybody loved the dog, and
Interest.
just,
Yeah,
and then remember when I gave you some seeds to plant?
I remember I mean I remember it vividly. It was some cilantro seeds. I put an X in the soil of this terracotta pot and put those seeds in the ground, watered them, and that was like, yeah, that was fun. We had this really cool planter garden,
And
on
you
the
were
porch.
you were the planter,
Yeah,
and
and we
and you
had,
watched those things grow, and it was so cool to see how excited you were. Because growing up, when I was the gardener,
yeah,
you weren't that enthusiastic.
No, no.
You guys would scream when I turned into the garden.
It was,
No!
we had to grab the steering wheel. Don't do it. I mean,
Gee.
we grew up really like right on the beach. I mean, go to school and go to the beach. Like that's what we want to do. But yeah, looking back on growing the garden, childhood wise, like I tell a lot of my friends have kids and they're teaching their kids like gardening and how to be healthy and stuff. And the kids really reject it because like none of their friends are doing the same thing. And I just say, look, like you're planting this foundation for them. So like if they do grow up and choose to want to do like if they feel that it's right for them, like they'll have that foundation. They won't have to start from scratch. And that's kind of how I feel about all of our time spent in the garden is like, I have this wealth of what it looks like to have like a really bitchin' garden and the time that it takes and the amount of effort that it takes to do it really, really well. And I'm not just like planting some seeds in the ground going like, oh yeah, they'll be fine. And like then using Miracle-Gro when they're not, like I've learned the organic methods and I know how important compost is. And really, if there's one thing that I think I've learned is life is really about consistency. So like the plants that you're taking care of, you water them in a consistent manner and you fertilize and you're paying attention to like the requirements of life. And I think that it goes with our lives as well. Like if we like the amount of effort that you put into something is the amount of growth you're going to get out of it. And it's just that consistency, like what, so yeah, that,
That's huge.
yeah,
That's really what we should talk about for the next 10 minutes.
yeah,
Because, that consistency that you're talking about when you put a plant in, when you put a seed in, you've got to water it. You can't let it dry out.
yeah,
Well, guess what? The way we feed ourselves is exactly the same thing.
right.
And, I was talking to a fellow yesterday whose wife is dying of cancer. And, they're in their 70s probably. And she's got about 8 specialists that she goes to down in Palm Desert. She's, not doing well. She's not happy. She's in a lot of pain. It's really miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And, I explained what I do. And, he explained that he had gone to a doctor and found that he had heartburn and that, he had an endoscopy and they saw polyps in his intestine. And he's been on antacids for his heartburn for a long, long time.
Uh,
And they're just giving him antacids and they told him to not eat spicy food. And he
what a
said,
joke.
and beer. He says, I love beer. I love spicy food. I'm
Yeah,
not going to stop eating spicy food and drinking beer. And I
right.
went, to myself, I went, well, no sense in talking to you anymore about what I do. Because, man, what I do is I take away the food that most people crave, which is killing them. Darndest thing. So when people eat a certain food and they eat it excessively all the time, it 9 times out of 10 shows up on an immunological test that that their body is producing an antibody against that food, which is then causing inflammation in the body, which then is the genesis of all disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so the foods that you crave and the foods that you eat all the time are generally the culprits. And when people stop eating those foods, and if they do a good job of it, what I see is in the first 2 to 3 weeks is their condition worsens. So if they've got heartburn, their heartburn worsens. If they've got headaches, their headache worsens. If they've got psoriasis, you get the picture. Whatever their symptoms are, in the first few weeks of eliminating the foods that we've precisely and comprehensively found as causing their problem, the inflammatory response, and you can't guess. You can't. That's the necessity of doing, individualized testing, because you can't say, oh, nightshades are making me sick, or gluten is making me sick. If you don't do a scientifically valid test, and the test that I use is the only food sensitivity test that's been patented, because all the other tests can't be proven to be reliable and accurate. So the one that I found, which is an incredible blessing, $200,000 in 8 years it took Dr. Dorval to patent it, but it's got a patent. So it's a very reliable test. And it's the most important test that I do. And I've seen it help people with every possible condition: mental, physical, psychological, spiritual, structural. It's an amazing test for all conditions. And when so and then when you eliminate those foods, what the patient then tells me in 2 or 3 months, when I say, okay, let's do a provocative food challenge, because once you've eliminated the major foods that are hurting you, and it's usually between 10 and 20 foods on almost everybody. When you eliminate those foods, you start cleaning up. Your body starts detoxifying. Your digestion starts to improve. You take the stress off of your immune system. So your immune system gets stronger. And you're cleansing. And after 3-4 months of being clean, then you can do what's called a provocative food challenge, where you take one of the foods that you were reactive to and you eat it in 3 out of 5 meals over a 2-day period. And you're supposed to eat twice the amount of that particular food that you would normally eat in a meal. I tell people not to do that because I've seen some really negative responses that just tear people up. So I don't say eat twice the amount, 3 meals. I say eat half the amount over a 2-day period. And then you have to watch and you see what happens over 3 or 4 days. These are developmental delayed food reactions. It's not a food allergy which you react to immediately, like if you eat peanuts or shellfish and you get immediate reaction. That's a different kind of reaction to a food. It's not a food intolerance, which is gluten or lactose or sucrose or soy or egg. That's another kind of reaction. This is a food sensitivity, and it takes 2 to 3 to even up to 4 days to react to that food. So there's no way that you're going to associate what you ate on Monday with feeling bad on Friday. That's why the testing is necessary.
Yeah.
And when they do that provocative food challenge, I tell them the test comes back with a graph of how severe the reaction is. And I tell them, don't test one that was really a severe reaction. Test a minor reaction. But you know what, Stuart? Most of the people, after 3 or 4 months of avoiding those foods and learning how to rotate their other foods and to control their blood sugar by eating the proper fuel ratio of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, 90% of them say, I don't want to eat that food. I'm doing fine. I feel better than I felt my whole life. Before they're going, oh, you're taking away the food that I love and that I eat all the time. What is left to eat? And what they all tell me later on is like, I'm eating a greater variety, enjoying my food more than I ever have. And as far as those foods that I've eliminated, not interested.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And considering that this is the major problem. And so when I still see clients, and I've got cancer patients, and I've got schizophrenic patients, and I've got chronic fatigue patients, I've got Hashimoto's patients, I've got psoriasis patients, I got, colitis, Crohn's disease, all these different kinds of patients. I don't treat those diseases.
Mm-hmm.
I help people get healthy.
Yeah. So that's the whole crux. I mean, that sentence right there.
And what we were talking about when you were talking about consistency, that's the key. I tell people, babies are fed on a schedule. old people that are 90 or 100, you better believe they live on a schedule. And so should all of us. And the more that we live on a schedule, the less stress, the more vitality, the more energy, which is people's major complaint. If you asked 1,000 people what their major complaint is, it's lack of energy. And by being consistent on how you feed yourself, how you exercise, how you sleep, how you think, how you pray, all of these actions as a human being, it's those actions that are responsible for all of the diseases.
Right.
Diseases don't happen out of the blue because you were born into a family that has breast cancer.
Yeah.
Diseases are our choosing because we're unconscious. And what I've seen is that the body's ability to heal is not to be underestimated. I mean, I've got a 90-year-old patient with leukemia up here that, I did testing and I said, give me 3 months, let's do this, remove these foods. Here's a dozen nutrients I want you to take. And he was coughing them down. He didn't like it much. Didn't particularly like giving up some of his foods either, but he did it. And in 3 months, we repeated the test, and 20 of the 70 tests had changed, and 15 of them changed positively, and 5 of them, would either stay, pretty much the same or maybe a little bit worse. But 75% of the chemistries that we were targeting, because that's what I do when I do a test, I see, okay, these tests are out of range. And so based on this test being high, this being low, and this being low, this is what I'm going to suggest you do. So then in 3 months, we can repeat those tests with Quest Lab and see if the test went up or down. And I've got a wonderful computerized graph that shows, the first test and the second test, and if it went up or if it went down. And then we can, as I also tell people, this is why I'm suggesting that you take some betaine hydrochloride. Your uric acid is high, your calcium is low, your protein is low, your blood urea nitrogen is such and such. All these things having to do with the digestion of proteins, and then we do the therapy and we change the diet. We repeat the tests, so we can.
Sorry.
So we've got something objective to actually monitor progress to because again, when you say that people get used to being sick, they say, hey, I'm healthy. But a lot of those people that say they're healthy, if we do a test and we know how to read the test results, because a lot of doctors wait for tests to be way high or way low. And if it's within range, which is 95% of the population, they say there's nothing wrong. It's only when it's really high or really low. That's missing the boat. That's not watching the trends, and catching a problem before it results in a disease. And that's what, what you got to do with cancer. That's what you got to do with Alzheimer's. That's what you've got to do with arthritis. That's what you've got to do with, with GERD or any other disease. You want to prevent it. And you prevent it by doing testing, seeing where you're at, and then starting and making the right choices on a daily basis. And if you're consistent, then the body heals itself.
So I think there's two components. It's like, one, you have to avoid all the modern things that cause inflammation or cause your immune system to respond. And then the other is like learn how to nourish yourself. So it's like you have to avoid the poison, and then you have to start to do the right inputs consistently. I know a lot of people in the health world that do the right inputs, but yet they still eat the poison. They're not going to heal that way, right? Like they're getting some benefit, but they're not going to feel the complete release of having a purified.
Yeah, the people that I'm working with now are pretty sick, and they've
Yeah.
been to dozens of doctors, and they've struggled for decades. And so getting them on board, on track, it requires a very sophisticated, complex, deep understanding. This is not paint by numbers. I met a woman the other day who told me about a man that she knows that's an incredible violin player living up in Topanga Canyon, and he's got heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Can you do an artery cleanse?"
Nice.
And she's very conscious of, she's a writer. She's written for health journals. She knows Ayurvedic medicine, which I have a lot of respect for. But too many people sell. Like if you go on the internet and you listen to doctors, there's a big, huge symposium about health. I'm going to listen to some of it today just because I'm curious. There's a bunch of doctors I've never heard of. And I'm curious as to what they're saying. But this guy, it's one of these summits, but too oftentimes a person has a certain shtick,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll say, this is the answer. I call it this for that. And before I started chiropractic school, I studied with this guy who taught me about the Essenes. And the Essenes were a sect of Jews that lived around 500 years before Christ, and probably thousands and thousands of years, the Brotherhood of the Essenes. And the Tree of Life was one of, in a lot of different philosophies and religions and mystics, they always used the Tree of Life. And the Essenes, it's reputed that Jesus was a member of the Essene community around the Dead Seas, and that the Essenes wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. But what they talked about is so wonderfully basic. It's looking at the forces of life: water, air, sun, joy, soil, the earthly mother, and then the heavenly Father is like power and wisdom and work. And so that there's these 7 cosmic forces of the heavens, and there's 7 earthly forces, and they were conscious of each of those, so that every 7 days they would rotate, and they would pay attention to air and wisdom, or power and the sun, or love and water. Love is the cosmic, water is the earthly. They correlate, and they would meditate on these forces every day of the year. So on every Friday night, it'd be water and wisdom, and they would meditate on water, meditate on wisdom, and during the night they would expect the cosmic angels to teach them, because they would program themselves before they went to sleep. They were focusing on this, meditating on this. In the morning, they'd focus on the role of water. And they'd they got so good at this that they could direct the water in their blood to an area of their body that was injured and heal it. And that's, so what they discovered thousands and thousands of years ago is still pertinent today. And so it is, it's the water and it's the minerals that are in our food that come from the rocks of the earth, and the air. This is from which we get our lives. This is what sustains us. And so this is true healing. It's not taking a vitamin that you're deficient in. It's figuring out, why am I deficient, and working on the root cause. It's not doing a drug to cover up a symptom to make you feel better and ignoring the root cause of why you're sick in the first place. So it's wise, it's proven. I see it work. And so when I work with people, I work with them mentally. I check out to see if they're panicked and if they have anxiety, if they're living in the past. So Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, Ram Dass, Be Here Now. So you have to learn how to forgive. And if you don't forgive, then good luck getting well physically or mentally. So you have to coordinate mental, spiritual, emotional with exercise, absolutely non-negotiable, have to exercise, proper diet to control your blood sugar, the right amounts of protein, fats, and carbs. As you say, avoiding industrialized food, and sleep. So this morning I was up at 4 because I really wanted to check out the stars. And by 4:30, it's already getting light and I can't see the stars anymore. So, I am going to take a nap this afternoon because 4 o'clock was, I try to get to bed early so that I can get up in that early morning. And then I hear the birds and I watch bats and I hear the songs, and I heard the animals rustling in the forest next to me last night. Didn't know if it was a raccoon. It wasn't a dog.
It's funny. I got your text, and I also woke up at 4 just because I had a nightmare about police brutality, and this cop was hassling me, and then I decided to stick up for myself, and it was just a big ordeal. But then I saw your text, and then the same situation that you had happening with the light and the birds, and I didn't go outside because there's a lot of mosquitoes here, and it's not the most enjoyable just to sit up. But I saw that you sat out on your porch and just was bathing in nature, and so I also got to enjoy the birds chirping really intensely for a good 15 minutes, and then they kind of
4 o'clock they're quiet. By 4:15 to 4:30 they're waking up. Now a month ago they were waking up around 5. But
the days are
getting longer. And of course it's spring, so there's babies being born, there's nesting going on. But
can you imagine these birds get up, these animals get up, they're so excited. There are some days I'm like this, but for the most part, most everyone I know wakes up tired, takes a while to get ready, takes a while just to even comprehend how they're going to function that day. They have no plan, they have no goals, they have no idea of what the it's these birds, they get up, they know they're happy, they're going to go get food, they're going to go get water, they're going to go bathe in the sun. Every single day is about embracing the elements, and doing this routine. And
when that animal started rustling, I was kind of glad I had a fence. So because I live right next to the forest. And a forest, unadulterated, unmolested forest. And I heard this rustling, and dogs rustle fast. This was a slow lumbering rustle.
Oh yeah.
And it was either a raccoon, a coyote, a mountain lion, a bear,
a deer.
Wasn't sure, but I was glad there was a fence there because I got scared last year with raccoons. We had a mama and 4 baby raccoons, and man, she's big as a big old great German Shepherd. She's a big mama, and her babies were so cuddly and cute you can't imagine. But they were scary, and they weren't afraid of me, and neither was she. And she'd growl at me, so I'd come out here because I get up early in the morning to come outside and listen to the birds and meditate. That's my morning routine. Well, when she was here, I wasn't. It's okay, I'll get in my car and go drive someplace out in the forest where God knows what's around me, but at least I'm not next to this mama raccoon.
Yeah. It's
So,
funny.
but what was the neatest thing was that the birds started alerting everybody to this animal. And the birds weren't chirping right above me. And all of a sudden, I've got, several birds that are chirping wildly, alerting everybody else. And when you hear birds chill, when they're singing like crazy and they chill, look up and you'll see a hawk.
Yeah. What is the Coyote Guide? Yeah, is that the one that teaches kind of what the forest and all the signs and how to track and what all the birds are saying? And yeah,
Yeah, John, I forget his name, but fabulous book. And that's, that's again what the Essenes said, that the laws of God are in nature. And so
yeah,
all of the great mystics of the world, what would they do? They'd go out in the desert.
have nature
And they,
teach you.
yeah, and they'd watch how nature works, and
What?
how,
Yeah, it's
and that's
profound.
where, yeah, that's where the laws are. So one of my favorite stories for Dr. Zeke, who translated the Essenes, he talked about Mother Earth. And he says, if you think a human if a mother loves their child, or if you think a raccoon mom loves her cubs, you just can't imagine how Mother Earth loves us humans. And and she gives us all of her gifts from the water and from the sun and from the air and from the minerals, and from the beauty. It's all part of us. And if we live within those laws with respect and gratitude, then we enjoy perfect health into our hundreds,
Mm-hmm.
and are happy, and our dreams we can manifest. Like when it was a dream of mine to go down into Mexico with you guys,
Right.
and Munoz wasn't exactly thrilled about it, but I had this vision that, oh my gosh, if we combined health with the therapeutics that he was using, which were primarily non-toxic therapeutics for cancer, I thought, oh my gosh, fantastic.
I'd like to
Well,
do it again without any of the therapeutics.
yeah, you don't need it. I
Yeah.
mean, they can get that on their own, but they
I
can't
mean,
find what we provided there.
to heal the gut and to support the basis, the foundation of life through food.
And
That
exercise and yoga
yeah,
and joy.
there need to be like a therapy as well. There has to be some psycho emotional therapy to break through the habits of the emotions that we cling to.
Well, what Dr. Zeke said, that if you don't abide by the laws, just the laws of nature, that the gifts that nature gives you will be taken away.
Mhm,
Your sight will be taken away. Your hearing will be taken away. Your heart health will be taken away. Your
mhm,
gut health will be taken away. But like the prodigal son, if you repent and return and start abiding by the laws, start feeding yourself right, start sleeping right, don't imbibe in drugs and alcohol, forgive, da 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 da, all those diseases, which are actually the body's effort to stay alive. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, cancer, and infection, those aren't what's killing you. Those are adaptations that your body is making because you're not taking care of yourself right. So if
mhm.
you get high blood pressure or high cholesterol or migraines, it's because you're not taking care of yourself. And like the good example is an infection. The infection means that there's a problem, but that infection is actually doing you a favor. So for
There it is.
example, candida in your gut, if you get an overgrowth of candida in your gut, that is feeding on undigested carbohydrate. And if that carbohydrate was not being digested by the candida, it would ferment and you'd get alcoholic poisoning.
Some people
So
have that, right? Isn't it very rare? But some people have.
yeah, they don't drink at all and their blood alcohol is 3.0
Yeah,
because they've got such a candida overgrowth. So to kill the candida
not a good
is
idea.
not the right idea. Sometimes with a tumor, you got to cut it out. I mean, there's times when chemo or radiation is probably appropriate with cancer. But if every cancer patient that I've worked with has at least a half a dozen other issues, from anemia to bacterial infection, to deficiency of digestive enzymes, to liver gallbladder sluggishness, so, and by taking care of those underlying problems, lo and behold, the cancer goes away. But if you ignore those problems and all you do is kill the cancer, cancer returns. So, but what Dr. Zeke said, that if you go back and you start observing the laws, that just like in the prodigal son, the father welcomed his son back into the household that had been out partying. And the son that hadn't gone out and partied and worked hard was kind of resentful. Like, Dad, how come you're forgiving Charlie? you know? And the dad said, man, Charlie's come back. I couldn't be happier. I'm happy you're here, but I'm thrilled that he was off course and now he's back on course. So forgiveness. Well, our bodies have this built-in forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the degree of healing, like you and I saw, Stuart, there are not many people who have seen the healing that you and I saw when we were working together at the beach in Tijuana. I guarantee you, there's not many people that have ever seen that. Patty saw it. So it's really neat that I can talk to Patty about it, because she saw. She would come down every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and she'd go, whoa, what happened to that person? They were dark and gray, and now they're bright and colored. What the heck?
That's so
It
nice.
was, but the trick, of course, is that you and I did everything. I went and bought all organic food. We cooked it in surgical stainless steel pots. We made 5 gallons of a different kind of bone stock every week. We fed people so much stock that they said, please, no more.
Yeah.
I said, what do you want to eat? No soup. Because we fed people so much stock, and that's before it was crazy. So we could buy bones for cheap. Now the bones that we bought for cheap are 10 times more than what they were when we were buying them.
Because stock is now
Weston Price, and
it's cool. I mean, the world is waking up to real health information, and people want to get healthy. So it's neat that's, and it's almost from seeing everyone get cancer. I mean, what, 1 out of 2 is going to get cancer. I mean, that's my generation sees the older generation and goes, oh, you guys are really sick. What's really going on here? And
I see your generation, many of my clients are in their 20s and 30s, and they're sicker than the 60 and 70-year-olds.
Right. Our environment is way more polluted than your environment was growing up. And the food that we grew up with is way worse than the food you guys grew up with. And you guys came from healthy stock where your grandparents actually had gardens and, didn't eat at restaurants, and it wasn't so industrialized food. And then you're a little less fortunate, and then your kids are a little less fortunate. And then the kids from my generation, having kids are way less fortunate. Just they're not as robust. They're not as healthy. They're not as fortified.
It's the whole field of epigenetics, the environmental triggers of our genes. And what they've shown from the Genome Project and all is that if our great-great-grandparents were using arsenic in their fields, and they were, that we can, 5 generations later, we can be affected by that.
Yeah.
And so today, when kids grow up with C-sections, they're born with a C-section, which completely destroys the natural, normal bacterial microbiome inside the gut. And then, they're sick, they have dermatitis, they grow up with a much more propensity towards asthma, towards being overweight. They get drugs and antibiotics, that further damage them as their kids growing up, because they got all this sinusitis and colds and flu and, all that. They're eating processed foods the whole time. I mean, so many of your friends that you've referred me grew up eating nothing but sugar and junk. Well,
most everyone I know is like, I say, oh, what did you eat growing up? And they can mention like 3 things that were just like, that's what they survived on. And it was always processed, but like bread, Vienna sausage, like whatever it is, it's like
Pop-Tarts,
Pop Tarts. Yeah. And I
cereal,
just cringe. I'm just like, oh yeah.
ice cream, and lots of candy.
Lots of ice cream, because ice cream actually, like, you crave it. There's actually some nutrients in there. And cheese, like
And
kids who are
then, and
starving
then,
growing up.
so we wonder why there's so much autism today. Because the people that are having babies are
Yeah.
unhealthy, so they have unhealthy babies.
Yeah.
So the docs that have trained me recommend that if someone wants to get pregnant, that they start getting healthy 2 years before they conceive.
I think
Because
that's yeah.
the man's sperm is every bit as important as the woman's eggs. So the men and the women, and that was the idea of the Greek uh,
Olympics.
Olympics, was that they wanted their young childbearing kids to be extraordinarily healthy, so they'd have healthy kids.
I always say it's like, have Spartan children, like get yourself so healthy and then have a kid, and then your kid's going to be like a fucking Spartan child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need. This planet needs like healthy, capable, functioning adults, to really like be able to think clearly and not just get tossed into the whole circus that's going on around us. Yeah. And I know that there were certain foods, like Western Price Foundation talks about this a lot, whereas like women who knew that they were going to get pregnant would eat certain foods, and usually it was like organs from different animals. And like ocean cultures, they would go out and hunt a shark, and it was all ceremonial, and would eat I think the liver of the shark. And then you'd think, I mean, orcas, right, go out and hunt great white sharks and literally extract like this organ and
That's true.
leave the entire animal whole.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's something.
And the lions, when they kill a deer, eat the gut contents before anything else.
And then they let the meat rot.
Well, they eat the meat, but the muscle is always associated with fat.
Right.
So
but I mean, they let the meat kind of digest. Is protein hard to digest, just in general? I mean, you
have to have hydrochloric acid.
A good functioning digestive tract.
Yeah, and you don't have to chew your meat.
Right. I mean, a lot of my friends go vegan, and then they try to eat meat again after realizing their energy level's low, and it's not so good health wise, and then they have a hard time digesting it for a little while.
You have to, I mean, to make hydrochloric acid is hard.
It's like, isn't it the hardest function of your body? Like it's one of the most energy intensive.
It has to be sequestered in the stomach, because if that acid got out of the stomach, it would digest your body.
Tissues, yeah.
So when you're under stress, the first thing that your body does is say, shut down the hydrochloric acid production.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. That's why you shouldn't eat when you're stressed.
Oh.
That's why you get digestive complaints when you're all stressed out and you eat. It doesn't work so good.
Interesting.
Because the body knows, man, this is a intensive energy endeavor. So, it's not essential right now, so I'm going to cut it out. So what I see, like with people that are 60 and older, almost everyone has a deficiency of hydrochloric acid. And it just is a matter of aging and not being too healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I look at a blood chemistry, there's about 10 chemistries that I look at to determine if there's a hydrochloric acid deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you give hydrochloric acid or the digestive enzyme to somebody who's still functioning, the feed forward and feedback loop will stop your body's own production. So too oftentimes, health food stores and alternative doctors will give people digestive enzymes, knowing that it's going to help with their digestion. But if they haven't specifically identified a deficiency of that enzyme in your body, and they give you, and you're producing it, and they give it to you, it shuts down your body's production. So that's one of my pet peeves, frankly. And
like supplements without testing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, bile salts, is really important, if you have a deficiency of bile salts and a deficiency of the pancreatic enzymes. So it's huge
Yeah.
that you pay attention to all that, but you have to be conscious of it. Being a physician, being being a health coach is not, it requires a lot of thought. I mean, it requires a lot of expertise. It requires clinical wisdom, from trying out what you've learned on dozens and dozens of people and then watching and seeing how it works. So I see a lot of patients and I get their records from the physicians that they've been going to. And generally, I'm not impressed,
Mm.
regardless of how famous the doctor is or what their degree is. It's really kind of sad that people think that they can take a class and and be and be a health coach, because you go to a health food store and the person there selling the vitamins will give you all sorts of advice. Take this, take this, take this, take this. And they really don't have much training. And yet the person, I listen to it when I'm at Trader Joe's or when I'm at Sprouts, and I in that section, and I hear a person come up and say, "What do you recommend for this?" And I hear what they say, and I just go, "Oh dear."
What's that one book, that really thick catalog? It's like natural.
Prescriptions for Nutritional Healing.
Yeah. I feel like that's where everyone gets their.
And that's good. But what I found is when I was working as a consultant teaching doctors, and many authors would use our lab. And so I got to know many of the people that write the books. And I would read the books, and as somebody who's been educated, I would appreciate that, they'd done a lot of research and there was a lot of good in there. But you have to make choices. And if you don't have clinical wisdom, then you're going to make choices based on
Your influence.
some learning, but it's very rarely. So I see those self-help books as actually more damaging than helpful. For the lay person that reads it, they then, and arguably they'll know more from reading a book about thyroid or reading a book about mood disorders or whatever than the doctors they're going to.
Yeah.
But they still, and if they've helped themselves, and then they start saying, well, I healed myself of Crohn's disease, or I healed myself of ulcerative colitis, and then they feel like they're qualified to tell other people.
Yeah.
Because there are hidden causes there, and there's a complexity. I mean, wouldn't you suppose that being a physician, you got to it's complex? and too often times it's like people want a protocol. Here, if you've got cancer, here's 15 nutrients that are good for cancer. Take these. Or if you've got chronic fatigue, here's what you do. Or you got Epstein-Barr virus, or you got Helicobacter pylori.
Can you, like, I have this question, like, can you just heal someone just by doing the right inputs and avoiding the wrong inputs? Like, do you really need to get really in depth, or are the foundations of health kind of the same for everyone?
Well, no, if
let's say you're not sick, like let's say you're not, let's say you don't have a disease. Let's say you want a foundation of health.
Yeah. Then doing the good things, eating on a regular basis, exercising every day, forgiving, sleeping well. Like, I just did a seminar on men's hormones, and oh my God, it was sophisticated.
Sleeping. Yeah.
And men make testosterone at night. So if you're not sleeping at night, you're going to be low on testosterone. And, and the reason why you're low on testosterone isn't because of a deficiency in some herb. It's because you're making the wrong lifestyle choices. You're diabetic, or you've got, you're not sleeping, or you've got chronic stress, or you're overweight,
Yeah.
and so, I oftentimes now see evidence of a heavy metal toxicity. It's common. All of
Really.
us are exposed to chemicals, and all of us have a certain burden of heavy metals. And I do some really neat testing, and I find it oftentimes. Okay, here it is. But to get rid of that heavy metal, you can't just take a supplement
Yeah.
that's been formulated to get rid of heavy metals. If that's all you do is take that supplement, and you don't do at least, go through a checklist of about 20 things, and each of those 20 things has about 5 little variables. So when I look at a chemistry, I spend a few hours, and I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of these chemistries, but it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and everyone is different. So you have to look at these chemistries and see, okay, well, this chemistry's out of whack. How is that in relationship to these that are out of whack? And how did this contribute to that? And what's the order in which this happened? So how do you reverse engineer that? And that's what separates the good from the bad, is that you're able to focus and prioritize on your therapeutic intervention. Because if a person has, it's common to have a half a dozen to a dozen things wrong that are imbalanced. Well, you can't just work on it all simultaneously, but you kind of have to, by making the right choice of what do I do first, and if I get this right, it's going to help this, this, and that. But if you do a protocol and you read a book and say, okay, here's the protocol for this problem, here's the protocol for this problem, here's the protocol for this problem, and you do those 3 protocols without a consciousness of the prioritization and the focus, it won't work. I've got a gal right now with chronic fatigue, and she said to me the other day, I'm so grateful that you're focusing on the spiritual and psychological components of this. And about 2 years ago, I was feeling overwhelmed with how I was getting really a lot of sick people. And it's like, am I capable of taking care of these really sick people? And I started having some self-doubts, like, man, this is above my league. And what I did, I really started focusing on studying God. So I studied Marianne Williamson big time, Course in Miracles. I studied more of Eckhart Tolle. I studied, of course, I've read the Four Agreements about 50 times. And I've studied a lot with Don Miguel and his work, and Wayne Dyer, of course, and then Ernest Holmes, Center for Spiritual Living. And, like the affirmative prayer, I learned how to pray. And here's how you pray. There's 5 steps. Number 1 step is acknowledging that everything is God. There's a power greater than ourselves that has created everything. Us too. So we're part of God's creation. And that God is not a loser, and that the universe is organized towards getting better and better. When you study physics and see, how planets are formed, how the universe is formed, there's a God is good, and God is love, and God is not fear, and God knows what that spirit knows what it's doing, and it tends to get better and better if you don't sabotage it. And so the third part of the affirmative prayer is to recognize that there are answers to the problems that you face, and that there is a natural order of things that allows you to heal. And the fourth part is to be grateful, to say, okay, everything is God. I'm part of God. God is healing, God or whatever word you want to use for it, spirit, whatever the word is, a power greater than ourselves that created everything, that power can work with me. And so you have confidence that your needs can be met. Then you develop an extraordinary gratitude for that. And the fifth one is to let go and let God. And that's it. So instead of saying, oh man, I got cancer, I need to be healed, or I'm financially strapped and I need some money, or I'm lonely and I need some love, send me some love. And you're asking for it like you're in need, as opposed to acknowledging that God has already granted you a life, and that within that life there is unlimited healing and abundance. And so it's called the affirmative prayer, and Wayne Dyer talked about it as assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So instead of coming at a need with being needy, come at that need with gratitude that there is an answer, and that answer, is your birthright. By being a human, you're granted this magical healing capacity, this magical capacity for love and joy. And when you start learning that, when we get an idea, that idea can be manifest from our subconscious into material form. We have power beyond our wildest imagination. And that's where, the Essene practices of disciplining yourself and paying attention. What are the powers of life? Obviously, it's water, air, sun, earth, love, joy, power, work, and by being conscious of all of these cosmic and terrestrial forces, we can harmonize ourselves with them, utilize them to fulfill our dreams and our purposes.
Great heaven on earth, it's already here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I like talking to you about creating, some health clinics, because you and I saw how well it worked. Better than, I've never seen as good a results, because we were in charge. We bought the food, we cooked the food, we put it on the table. They didn't have to do diddly. Well, that's pretty deluxe.
I'd like to do it again where we have a film crew that actually documents it so that people can see the inputs, like how to cook, what to cook, and just the consistency. And I think that would be huge, because a lot of this is like we're asking people to go back and continue these efforts. And unless you've stepped into the kitchen and you go to the grocery store and you like take responsibility, then we can heal people, but they're going to go back home and they're going to get sick again. They're not going to keep it up. And I would really like to help people not get sick in the first place. I think so. Healing cancer and not getting cancer, it's the same role that you have to play.
I agree.
So if we could record it, showcase like, hey, like these are the priorities that you have to make, and this is how you do it, and just support people that way. I think that'd be huge. With the clinics, it would also be great to have internships. People can come and learn, how, like, maybe they don't have cancer, but they want to learn how to be healthy, and they can come learn how to cook, and through that
people have cancer and don't know it for 10 or 20 years.
Could you go real quick and just talk about what cancer is, like how it is, like how it comes to be?
All diseases are when we get out of the natural law, when we ignore the healthy habits.
Right.
So when we adapt bad habits, what happens is that we become malnourished. And when we you know, when we're even, if we're malnourished, it may be that we're eating a completely organic, paleo, keto, no toxic diet, but our digestive system is not working right. And so, you know, the first step in healing is to improve digestion. When digestion isn't working and we're lacking what our body needs to repair and rebuild itself and for energy, then we start creating deficiencies. And when chemistries get out of range, then we start seeing tissue damage. And that tissue damage creates toxins. And if our body can't get rid of the toxins, then we become toxic. So we're malnourished and we're toxic. When that happens, our poor immune system just doesn't know what to do. We've got two parts of our immune system: antibodies, which are to detect foreign substances in our body. A foreign substance is called an antigen. And an antigen, by definition, is a protein that stimulates an antibody, because the antibodies are the guards in our body that make sure that nothing foreign gets in. And 95% of what our immune system does with that innate immune system is does nothing, because it says, hey, that's Stuart. This is Stuart. This is Stuart. Wait a minute, this ain't Stuart. And if it finds something that's not Stuart, which is either damaged tissue, which it doesn't perceive as you because it's damaged tissue, that's sort of the basis of developing autoimmunity, you know, where we start to attack damaged tissue. And that's because the damaged tissue is perceived as non-self. So what damaged the tissue? Well, it's either a food, bug, or a toxin. And so we initially will produce antibodies against foods, bugs, and toxins. But if that continues long enough, then those foods, bugs, and toxins, together with the antibody response, causes inflammation, which then causes tissue damage. Then the immune system starts to attack the damaged tissue. And then, because the damaged tissue is so close to normal tissue, it starts to attack normal tissue. That's autoimmunity. And that's unfortunately really on the rise. So much autoimmune illness: Hashimoto's, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease. You know, it's unfortunate.
So it's malnourishment.
Malnourishment, toxicity, and then our immune system gets overburdened where it's fighting all that, and it gets weak. So then we get an infection, and we can't handle the infection. And then our white blood cells, you know, which are the other part of the immune system to fight toxins and infections, they also get overwhelmed. And so our immune system gets tired and fatigued. We're toxic and we're malnourished. So what does that equal? Cancer.
Wow.
Schizophrenia, bipolar, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue, eczema, heartburn.
Oh, you name it.
So you can see then how ridiculous it is to take prescription drugs.
Yeah. That's the only option for most people. That's what their insurance plan.
Or to take vitamins and minerals and superfoods.
Yeah. It's all about the foundation. You have to start with the good foundation.
So everybody with cancer, regardless of the type of cancer, when I do the chemistries, when I look at the comprehensive chemistry, I look at their white blood cells, I look at their red blood cells, I look at their liver function, their gallbladder function, pancreatic function, hydrochloric acid production, you know, mineral level, calcium, potassium, magnesium, micronutrients, the enzymes, dehydration. And then I look at the hormones, and then I'll look at the fatty acids, and then I'll look at maybe the amino acids. Maybe we'll look at the neurotransmitters. You know, when you then look at whether or not all those systems are balanced, when you're really sick, that's why I say it's complex. And people go to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor, and they never get well. So most of the people that I'm working with now have been to 10 or 20 doctors and never gotten well. They've tried everything. And so it's not, you can't use a book and go by a protocol. You have to look at all of that with an understanding. And man, I've been studying this for 40 years. I'm still doing seminars. I mean, I'm still studying.
Yeah.
And I guess when you say that you want to do something, because I'm ready to retire. You know, I'm ready to kind of, because I tell you, it's a bit frustrating being me. Because I see so many people that are sick that are not aware and are not willing to do what it takes to get well. And I have enough trouble with the people that are working with me that want to get well, to teach them. And that's where I can kind of give people a bye. You know, it takes time. I spend a lot of time with my clients. And if I didn't, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not just the time, it's education. Because, I mean, look how hard it is for people to figure out how to control their blood sugar.
I know. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and then they go out to a restaurant.
I think it's just having access to information. You could have the desire to figure something out. And if you are really, really, you know, gung ho about something, then you will figure it out eventually. But most people are just kind of that they don't have that ability to kind of, you know what I mean, search deep.
I have a woman that I really like a lot that's in her 80s, lives in Boston, has, you know, she has a lot of money. And I helped her get rid of her asthma when she was in her late 70s that she'd had her whole life. And by doing the work with me, her asthma, which had been a problem her whole life, was gone. Well, she came out to Idlewild and stayed here for a month. And I brought her into the kitchen and I showed her how to cook. I said, look, this is easy. She said, look, Chuck, I do a lot of things that you think that you might look at what I do and say it's easy. It ain't easy. And what you're teaching me, for someone that's never cooked, this ain't easy. So quit telling me it's easy. You know? But she got embroiled in a controversy with her neighbors that's required a lot of effort. And she quit. She doesn't cook very much. And she quit taking care of herself. And she's sick. And she wants to, you know, she'd like to come back out here. But she's, you know, she's saying, where can I go to where I can rest and be taken care of? And she's got money.
But that's not the formula. That's not how you do it.
But it would be nice. That's what I'd like to have for us.
That's like a retreat center.
Yeah, I'd like that. If we had learning centers, like what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I don't know where someone, I know of a place in Germany for really serious cancer problems. But I know lots of places around the world.
So you have the retreat center to help people get their feet back underneath them, but you also have to create content for them to support themselves.
Yeah, you got to educate them.
And doing so help other people who aren't so far gone, but know that they need to work on it. And that
if we had a 10-day program to educate people and to, you know, get people started, wow.
Yeah.
And if it, you know, because again, it's really sad that there's, for people that are really sick that need to go someplace to be taken care of, like what you and I did in Tijuana.
You don't know any place?
No.
Really?
That does a good job. There are places that do a half-assed job.
I know.
But when it comes to being really sick with cancer, you can't compromise, you know, on.
You don't just do a juice fast and vitamin C bags.
Worst thing in the world. You know, I fast every year, but
Yeah.
I don't have people that are sick fast.
Yeah.
Fasting requires knowledge and being conscious, and I think you should be healthy. You can fast somebody who's unhealthy and they'll feel better, but when they start eating again, they'll die. Fasting a sick person is incredibly irresponsible, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what
So,
most places do, right?
yeah, intermittent fasting, you know, that's crazy. Keto is crazy. With somebody who knows what they're doing, that just didn't read a book and do keto and feel great and then teach everybody else how to do it, you know, like there are times when keto makes sense. There's, you know, I don't think an intermittent fast is good, but you know, but I'd rather teach people how to eat than how to not eat.
Yeah. I have a friend
Not
who's,
eating is easy. You just
yeah.
don't eat.
I have a friend
It's a
who's
little
really into
bit.
fasting and you know, really talks about all the benefits of it and sells it really well. And then when he's off the fast, he like eats sugar and bread and like he's not healthy. He doesn't, I mean, he looks young and he looks healthy, but like, and then we're friends. And so it's like, I know how to eat. Like I know exactly how to eat so that you have health, and he knows exactly how to not eat so you have health. So it's kind of a
Well,
funny,
here's
it's like, what's more crucial, learning how to not eat or learning how to eat?
yeah. And why do people feel good when they're fasting?
Because they're not being burdened by all the poison.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you have to identify the poison and eliminate that. And you don't do that with not eating.
Yeah.
You feel good
Yeah.
because you're not attacking your food that's making you sick because you're not putting food in your mouth.
Right.
But then if you haven't learned what foods are good and what foods are bad, and it's not in any book, it has to be individualized, find out. There's so few people that know about the food sensitivity test, Stuart. And
Yeah,
of the people,
more and more people are getting testing though. I've talked to a lot of friends and they are getting.
but if they're not using
I know they're not using
KBMO,
the good one, then they're
and
not
if
going to
they're
find
not,
the accurate
and
results.
I've never met one person that knows about rotation, not
Mm,
one.
yeah. Well, these videos and more to come are to do that. You know, I think our first video we got about 80 views or something. Like that's kind of cool for literally that's just like word of mouth. So just continuously putting out good information and then people will start figuring it out and then it will
Well,
change the conversation.
I'd love to have other people on our calls.
Yeah. Okay. We totally can do that. That would be good. Yep. For the everyday folk.
Are you going on your slippery slide today?
Yeah, I might try and go spearfishing. It's really windy. But yeah, later this afternoon is slip and slide party. Yeah, it's gonna be. It's like springtime. It kind of oscillates from like really hot, just like uncomfortable, to like very rainy and a little bit cold. Today it's like really windy. There's no waves on the North Shore. South Shore has some waves, so it's kind of like this transition time. So people are like getting more into mountain biking and more into fishing and diving and like
man.
longer days, earlier mornings, later nights. It's fun. Yeah. So
Can you
yeah.
hear the chimes? Can you hear the chimes?
Yeah. I mean, I have mine too right here too. So I think the two of them have been like.
Do you hear them at night?
Sometimes, yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And they always play different songs.
True.
They're not just the same old pattern.
It's angelic. Like whenever people come over, they're like, "This is like a church, like a church sounds or something."
These are some of the best chimes manufactured. Not all chimes are equal. Patty really, she was here when she was researching these chimes.
Uh-huh.
And she spent hours and hours and hours. And she's a good shopper and a good finder. So these are, and she sells them at the Tree of Life now, and nobody buys them. I said, Patty, no, chimes are chimes until you find out, whoa, these are like not your average chime.
Does she have them in the garden in the display? Are they
Yeah. Oh, and you can hear them, and she's got like 6 of them, and it's
that
like,
are out and displayed?
yeah, and it's
Really?
like, oh my God. I go
Yeah.
there and I'm just like, but people don't buy them because
Yeah.
they don't know. This is so quality. I'm actually I was laying in bed trying to figure out what I'm going to get her for her 70th birthday. It's kind of
Uh-huh.
an important birthday,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to get her chimes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
It's one of my most favorite gifts from you for sure. It
yeah.
like it fills the air with like such a nice feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
cool. What are you gonna do for the rest of the day?
well, I'm going to listen to that crazy health seminar.
Nice.
I'll sample it at least just to see what they're saying.
Nice.
I'm going to review the men's hormone seminar that I went to. I want to also review the probiotic seminar, and I'm going to
Cool.
ride my bike again, and I'm going to plant.
You built your cages?
In fact, here, let me show you. Oh, and you've seen my, whatever that's called.
The railing?
No, the flower.
Which one?
You don't
Oh,
see it?
the tulip?
Yeah.
Nice. I don't exactly see it.
Amaryllis.
Uh-huh.
So here's a little cage. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, cool.
So that one's for these little like 1-inchers.
Well, they're for bulbs or
No, for a little,
for
little.
plants?
Yeah, and it's a 1-incher
Yep.
or a 2-inch, and then I fill this up with good soil, and then put that in it, and then bury this,
Nice.
and then put good soil all around it, and this is wired off at the bottom, and that's been the magic. Here's
Protecting.
this is what we did about a month ago. This is an apple tree that gets eaten every year. But I dug out this whole circle, and I dug down a foot deep,
Uh-huh.
and I put in gob, the compost,
Nice.
and rock dust. And then this is my chicken manure compost pile. See all the worms?
Yeah. Wow.
See the earthworm castings on top?
There's so many worms on top too.
Yeah.
Happy.
And then I'll take look at this. You think that was a lot of worms?
Whoa. Fun.
And then here's my compost bubbler. This is my manure tea.
Nice.
Put it in there, and I just made this for 2 days. There's my compressor. And then where's the bubbler? Here's
And that just increases the aerobic bacteria.
yeah. So here's the bubbler that goes in the bottom. It's got holes in the bottom of it.
What is that for usually?
Bubbling compost.
Oh, really? It's specifically made for that?
Yeah.
Because you can use like a fish, right? Just like a regular fish tank one.
Then here's where I put,
The filter.
compost in. But I just dump it in the fish tank now. And there's
Okay.
my cedar tree. Do you see that thing?
Which one?
That great big tree out there?
I mean, not really. Right now you're covering it with your camera. Oh yeah. What is that one?
That's a cedar.
Wow.
And then this is a pine, and this vine goes all the way up there. And back
Nice.
here, that's an oak tree, a very mature, big old black oak tree.
Surrounded.
Coulter pine with 2-foot pine cones.
Oh yeah, the Widowmaker.
And then here's more cedar trees. This is, the porch.
How fun. Love it.
And then,
Sanctuary.
yeah, here's our little sun room, our mud room. And then this is There's the chimes.
Beautiful.
And that's an orchid down there, a native California orchid. That's a lemon lily that's growing that has these amazing blossoms.
Is that the native of the area?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they're pretty much extinct.
Because they were
And then-
harvested?
Yeah. Here's all the rocks that I gather out of Garner.
Cool. Fun. I gave all mine away.
Ah,
Oh, no, not from Garner, but from Desert Center.
Yeah. Oh my God. Here's the
Sage.
sage, and then here's a electric blue.
Nice.
There's a deer grass. There's another sage. This is stinging nettles.
Stingless nettle,
strawberry-
though? Or is it
Huh?
still have this? Does it still have the stinger?
Oh yeah,
You're gonna plant that?
it's growing. That's a plant.
Is it in a pot or is you planted
Yeah,
it?
it's in the ground.
Is that when you planted?
It actually grew native.
Uh-huh.
Look at it. It's up in the cedar tree.
Interesting. You know you can eat those.
I know. I'm going to.
Nice.
Here, this is a wild rose.
Nice.
There's a blackberry, and then here's my strawberries in my huge pot.
Cool.
And then,
Have fun.
so here's our driveway. Can you see the driveway?
Yep.
And there's a cedar tree, and all of our trees, because of my garden, do you see how healthy they are?
Yeah, everything gets watered and fertilized. It's
Oh,
so
they're
beautiful.
crazy. Here's some deer weed that I'm going to plant today. That's what's going to go on those little cages.
Oh, neat.
And then here's a native grass. There's